Hi everyone, it's Katrina.
Jangdu Mausoleum. In 2009, archaeologists discovered a 2,100-year-old royal tomb north of Shanghai in Jiangsu, China. It belonged to a king named Liu Fei, who ruled over the Jiangdu kingdom for 26 years until he died in 128 BC. It took 3 years to excavate his underground mausoleum made up of many tombs that were once covered by a large earthen mound. 2 115-foot-long shafts led directly to the king's tomb. What made this discovery particularly fascinating was the sheer volume of treasures found in Liu Fei's royal tomb. Even though this site had already been looted and plundered, the burial contained over 10,000 artifacts. This includes gold, silver, bronze, jade, and lacquer treasures. There were also numerous life-size chariots accompanied by several dozen smaller models. A collection of weapons found in the tomb consists of iron swords, spearheads, knives, and 2-handled pole weapons called halberds. The king must have also been a fan of musical instruments, since the researchers uncovered chime bells, parts from stringed instruments called zithers, and jade tuning pegs decorated with dragons. These lavish grave goods would have only been furnished for a ruler with extremely high-end taste. Liu Fei certainly fit the profile for this type, according to the ancient historian Sima Qian, who described the king's lifestyle as marked by extreme arrogance and luxury. The mausoleum consists of 3 main tombs, 11 attendant tombs, 2 chariot and horse pits, and 2 weaponry pits, according to a scholarly article the team wrote for an archaeological journal. The archaeologists also found the remains of a wall that once encircled the site, measuring 1,608 feet on each side. They investigated the mausoleum as part of a rescue excavation when it came to light that the complex was threatened by quarrying or digging out large amounts of rock nearby. Sadly, the king's remains were long gone, and while normally his remains would have been encased in an incredible suit of jade, archaeologists only found shattered tiny pieces. This indicates that whoever arrived here before took the most valuable item, but even the tiny fragments left behind indicate that this tomb and coffin would have been a very impressive sight to behold. Nearby, there is a tomb that is also missing the remains of whoever was buried there, but there is an entire jade coffin still intact, making it the only undamaged jade coffin discovered in China.
I am very happy to announce that this video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. If you like our channel, you will definitely enjoy CuriosityStream. It's the best place to watch documentaries about science, history, technology, nature, travel, and so much more. They have exclusive award-winning films and shows that you can't watch anywhere else. One of my favorites is Unexplained Science, what scientists still don't understand. You know we love stuff like that over here, and this documentary asks important questions of whether other intelligent life exists, and why there are so many things we don't have answers to yet. Another great one is Ancient Oceans, that talks about all the wild and crazy creatures that lived in the sea in prehistoric times. You can think of it as the Netflix for nerds, the Hulu for history buffs, or the Disney Plus for the scientist in us. It's a subscription-based streaming service that offers thousands of documentaries and non-fiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers. CuriosityStream offers the deepest collection of the best documentaries from around the world, and for an incredible price. Available worldwide, it's the service for people who want to learn, explore, and understand more about anything and everything. And new shows are added every week. You can watch on all of your favorite streaming devices, so check it out. Go to curiositystream.com/origins or scan the QR code for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and nonfiction series. And for our fans, use promo code ORIGINS and you will save 25% off. It's already one of the most affordable and best deals in streaming. So click the link below or go to curiositystream.com/origins and save 25% right now.
Massive Roman coin hoard. Around 1800 years ago, someone buried over 5,500 silver coins in what is now Augsburg, Germany. They never returned to collect their stash. The massive hoard of Roman denarii remained untouched until earlier this year, when archaeologists unearthed the coins from an old riverbed. They were found scattered, most likely from a flood that had washed them away from their original hiding spot. An ancient coin expert said that the youngest coin the team has identified so far appears to have been minted at the beginning of the 3rd century. They believe that the hoard was buried around the same time near a road outside of the Roman city of Augusta Vindelicum. But the team hasn't figured out who hid the coins or why. They found no other artifacts nearby, leaving the Horde a standalone mystery that may never be solved. At the time the money was buried, the Roman Empire was thriving, but it was approaching a tumultuous time known as the Crisis of the 3rd century. This period of destabilization started around 235 and nearly saw the empire collapse as barbarians and other tribes migrated into Roman territory. The archaeologists who found the coin hoard haven't speculated about whether they think the stash has anything to do with the crisis, but it's hard not to wonder if it's a possibility. Leprosy in the Caribbean. Petite Moustique is a small, uninhabited Caribbean island measuring just 100 acres. It's part of a group of islands collectively known as St. Vincent and the Grenadines. There are no easy landings or large beaches, and the island is inconveniently hilly, which explains why nobody lives there, but people have passed through there. In 2003, archaeologists found a human skull on Petite Moustique. They recently dated it to sometime during the late 18th or early 19th century and identified cranial deformities that are consistent with leprosy. It's the earliest known solid evidence of the disease in the Americas, and one of just a handful of examples of leprosy being identified on a skeleton in the Western Hemisphere. Records suggest that leprosy made its way to the Caribbean as far back as the mid-17th century, but these reports are incomplete, and the skull is helping to paint a more complete picture of the disease's history in the region. This study also found documents indicating that there may have been a special hospital on the island during the early 19th century. Patients would have been brought there and kept separate from the uninfected population as part of an effort to curb the spread of the disease. Leprosy was particularly scary because it led to noticeable disfigurement of the hands, feet, and face. The condition's visibility bred a widespread stigma against patients that still persists in some parts of the world today, even though there is a cure thanks to modern medicine. So it makes sense to think that a leprosarium would have been established on an empty island like Petite Moustique, where sufferers could be kept hidden from the public eye and isolated. Hidden Tudor paintings. It's pretty common for people to find things they didn't expect while renovating their home, but not all discoveries are created equal. The Landmark Trust, a British organization dedicated to saving historic buildings, recently found a collection of 16th century Tudor wall paintings at Calvary Old Hall in West Yorkshire, England. Inspectors made what was later described as the discovery of a lifetime during a routine investigation ahead of restorations at the medieval landmark. The artwork was uncovered in a very undistinguished little bedroom, according to Landmark Trust historian Caroline Stanford, who spoke with reporters. At first, the inspectors noticed a mere smattering of color, but it was intriguing enough for them to take a closer look. They continued investigating and found that 3 of the room's walls are covered in the paintings. Stanford explained that it's extremely rare to find Elizabethan artwork on this scale, or in such good condition. The paintings were inspired by artwork that was found in the Roman Emperor Nero's Golden Villa, which was built around 64 AD. A young man discovered the ancient residence in 1480 when he slipped and fell through a hole and into the building. The designs inside soon became famous throughout Italy, England, Germany, and other parts of Europe. Known as grotesque work, the style was what it sounds like. It consisted of bizarre imagery that would be considered ugly or even repulsive by today's standards. But back then, it was all the rage, and it was a sign of being educated and wealthy. The Landmark Trust is scrambling to secure the necessary funding to preserve the fascinating artwork. Time is of the essence, especially since the Calverley Old Hall is one of England's most at-risk buildings. Badlands Guardian. When Lynn Hickox got lost on her way to a museum in Alberta, Canada in 2005, she pulled out her phone and loaded Google Earth. She was new to the program and was still learning how to use it, but had the eye of a seasoned pro. While perusing the area with a bird's eye view, Hickox spotted a massive rock formation that looks like a Native American man wearing a headdress and facing westward. The resemblance is uncanny. Known as the Badlands Guardian, the structure dwarfs Mount Rushmore in size, and when you look at its stunning features, it's easy to assume that perhaps a First Nations tribe carved it out of the rock centuries ago, especially since it's in an area traditionally associated with the Blackfoot culture. It would have been an enormous undertaking, especially since the image can only be seen from high above. But believe it or not, the Badlands Guardian was naturally formed. Scientists believe that it's at least several hundred years old, and that it was created during a period of fast erosion caused by heavy winds and flooding. It just happens to be a coincidence that the formation appears to bear indigenous symbolism, making it fascinating in its own right, even though it wasn't carved by human hands. And now for number 4, but first want to give a big shout out to Penny Kerrigan and Jana Highway. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe for more videos about amazing discoveries. Unfinished Roman aqueduct. The Roman Empire went down in history for its iconic and innovative structures, which were both elegant and functional. A period known as the Roman Architectural Revolution saw the widespread construction of roads, temples, dams, amphitheaters, aqueducts, bridges, and other engineering marvels. But not all of these ambitious projects came full circle, as one recent discovery shows. While excavating at the ancient city of Artashat in modern-day Armenia, archaeologists found the remains of an unfinished Roman aqueduct bridge. Built between 114 and 117 AD, it's the easternmost arched aqueduct in the Roman Empire. At the time, Emperor Trajan was in power. He oversaw the second largest expansion of the Roman military and also commissioned many public buildings. It was under Trajan's rule that the empire's territory reached its maximum size. He attempted to incorporate the province of Armenia into the empire before he died unexpectedly of a stroke at age 63. Trajan's successor Hadrian relinquished Armenia while the aqueduct was still being built, and it was simply left unfinished. A statement from the University of Munster explained that the structure is evidence of Rome's failed imperial ambitions in Armenia, showing that despite being immensely powerful, the empire wasn't infallible. Chan Chan mass grave. During the 15th century, a group of elite women who lived in the ancient city of Chan Chan in modern-day Peru dedicated their lives to weaving textiles. They also remained devoted to their craft in death, as the recent discovery of a mass grave has revealed. Found in what is now the province of Trujillo, the burial contained the remains of 25 people. Most of the individuals were women under the age of 30, and some were teenagers and kids. The women were buried in a seated position with bent legs. Their skeletons were wrapped in a cotton cloth and then an outer cloth made from plant fiber. The deceased were surrounded by needles, spindles, and other equipment that was used for making textiles, suggesting that the women were career textile workers. In addition to these tools, archaeologists found a number of grave goods, including dozens of ceramic objects. 30 isn't considered old today, but back then, the average human life expectancy was no more than 40 years, so the women in the grave weren't considered young when they died. Based on the items they were buried with, experts believe that they were high-ranking members of their society. Chan Chan was the capital of the Chimu Empire and the largest pre-Columbian city in the Americas. The civilization peaked during the 15th century, shortly before it was conquered by the Incas in 1470. While it was customary for the Chimu culture to practice human sacrifice, there are no signs that the people in the newly discovered burial were killed during sacrificial rituals. But there is evidence that the individuals were laid to rest at 2 separate times, and that some of the remains were possibly transported to the grave from another burial site. Mercury poisoning. It's common knowledge today that mercury is incredibly dangerous to the human body. Exposure to the heavy metal can cause a host of unpleasant and potentially fatal symptoms, including muscle weakness, speech impairment, loss of coordination, a pins and needles sensation, tremors, insomnia, emotional disturbances, memory loss, and more. Before people knew that mercury is dangerous, many cultures touched or ingested it regularly, and some even assigned supernatural power to it. For example, during the 3rd century BC, the first Chinese emperor Qin Shi Huang drank mercury because he thought it would make him immortal. But instead of achieving eternal life, he unknowingly poisoned himself to death. During the 19th century, Abe Lincoln took mercury pills for his anxiety, believing that they had medical value. He only stopped when he realized that the tablets were making him feel worse. It wasn't until the mid-20th century that scientists realized that mercury is dangerous, bringing a long overdue end to the belief that it's beneficial in any way. But when did our history of using it begin? A new study detected the earliest known evidence of mercury poisoning in humans in 5,000-year-old remains that were found in Spain and Portugal. In an attempt to answer the question of how common mercury use was during ancient times, researchers analyzed bones belonging to 370 people who lived over a 5,000-year time span. They detected unusually high levels of mercury in some of the samples, which they believe were caused by exposure to cinnabar, a toxic mineral with a bright red hue that was used as a paint pigment. Cinnabar was first mined around 7,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. The remains with the highest amounts of mercury were dated between 2900 and 2300 BC, at the tail end of the era. By then, cinnabar had become a highly sought-after sacred substance in some cultures. Whether people ingested it on purpose or by accident is a mystery. Cinnabar use greatly decreased around 2200 BC at the start of the Bronze Age, but as you learn today, humanity was just getting started with its affinity for mercury. Planned population growth. The exact reasons for the collapse of the ancient Maya civilization are unclear. Experts have long believed that numerous factors contributed to its downfall, including a burgeoning population that the culture's agricultural system couldn't support. But a recent study found that this narrative might be flawed. Using LiDAR technology, which enables researchers to see structures that are hidden beneath thick foliage, researchers from Brandeis University surveyed a portion of former Maya territory situated along the modern-day border between Mexico and Guatemala. Then, they searched the same area on foot. The team found extensive evidence of a sophisticated irrigation system in and around Maya settlements, but there was a conspicuous lack of signs that a population boom had occurred there. These findings contradict the theory that the Maya couldn't produce enough food to feed its population. At the very least, it showed that some settlements lived comfortably. The researchers' initial goal wasn't to challenge the idea that agriculture couldn't keep up with the civilization's growth. They were originally hoping to learn more about how the Maya lived in the region, which isn't as thoroughly studied as some others. The realization that residents lived far less hand-to-mouth than the team expected was simply an added bonus.
Lockdown gardening discovery. During the pandemic lockdown in 2020, just like many of us who suddenly found ourselves spending lots more time at home, a homeowner in the southeast of England got bored. With all this extra time on their hands, they decided to do some serious yard work. So they took up gardening with a vengeance. While weeding their yard in April, however, they scooped 63 gold coins out of the dirt. The gold coins date back to the reign of King Henry VIII in the 16th century. Amazingly, 4 of the coins were found inscribed with the initials of various wives that the king had throughout his tenure as ruler of England. This includes Catherine of Aragon, Anne Boleyn, and Jane Seymour. But get this, according to the New York Times, this was only one of over 47,000 archaeological discoveries reported in England and Wales throughout 2020. The lack of things to do meant that many people took digging in the garden to whole new depths. We don't know exactly how much the amateur gardener made from the 63 coins they found, or if they even made any money at all. By law, people are required to report any finds to the government so they don't get lost or sold, so that history can be shared with everyone. Ancient Crusader sword. In October of 2021, a scuba diver stumbled upon a piece of treasure 900 years old. The diver, who just so happened to be an amateur, was 13 feet underwater and 650 feet from the coast of Israel when he came across this incredible find. From out of the darkness, he saw the unmistakable shape of a sword. The blade was 3 feet long, with its handle totally crusted over with sea barnacles. Unable to contain his excitement, the diver grabbed the sword and swam to the surface. He then got a hold of the Israel Antiquities Authority and told them of his discovery. Putting the artifact into their hands assured that this amazing piece of history could be properly preserved. The diver believed the sword had been buried under the sediment, but had likely risen to the surface thanks to undercurrents moving the sand. The really amazing part of the discovery comes from what the archaeologists learned about the sword. Immediately, they recognized it as a sword from the days of the Crusaders. Its shape is the exact shape of a Crusader sword. Additionally, the sword was discovered roughly 1 mile from an ancient Crusader fortress, the Athlete Castle. For those who don't know what exactly the Crusades were, they were a series of military campaigns undertaken between 1096 and the end of the 13th century. The Crusades were fought by European Christians attempting to retake the Holy Land, mostly Jerusalem, from the Muslim rulers. This amazing sword had belonged to one of these European warriors, probably stationed at the nearby fortress. But
but how the sword ended up buried beneath the waves is still a mystery. Rare Roman statues. While working on the new HS2 railway system in England, archaeologists unearthed a miraculous trove of treasure from the Roman era. The shocking discovery was made at an excavation in Stoke Mandeville, when workers were digging up an ancient Norman church. They had already discovered that the original church was built over an even older Anglo-Saxon structure. It was in the final days of their excavations when they found that there was a third layer to the site. Beneath the crumbled ruins of the Anglo-Saxon structure were remnants of Roman occupation. In total, the archaeologists dug up 3 huge stone statues. 2 were busts, and 1 was just a head. The priceless discoveries were found together, with the bust being a representation of a man and the other a woman. The third statue, with only the head recovered, was of a child. All 3 were discovered surrounding a circular ditch and may have been vandalized before they were ripped down from wherever they had been on display. According to Dr. Rachel Wood, the lead archaeologist on the project, all the statues are in surprisingly good condition. They have been so perfectly preserved for over 2,000 years that you can still see the clear impression of the people the statues were made to depict. It's like staring into the eyes of the past. Archaeologists were also able to recover a hexagonal glass vase at the site, and now believe that they have uncovered all artifacts located there. It's incredible what the railway construction project had unintentionally unearthed about the history in the area. The Bactrian Treasure. The Bactrian Treasure is a collection of over 20,000 golden artifacts. It's the most legendary treasure in the history of Afghanistan, though right now, where it's actually located is a complete mystery. Let's go back to the beginning. Every last one of these 20,000 artifacts, made from pure gold, were uncovered from a series of graves at Tula Tepe back in 1978. These graves are over 2,000 years old. At the time of the discovery, the gold was placed on display at the National Museum of Afghanistan, as well as the Presidential Palace. There were gold rings, countless gold coins, weapons crafted from pure gold, and dazzling crowns fit for royalty. There was also a lot of treasure crafted from stones like turquoise, lapis lazuli, and carnelian. According to scholars, the graves belonged to 6 extremely wealthy nomads from Asia. They had likely been traveling across the region with a huge hoard of treasure on them when they died. Then, for some unknown reason, all 6 nomads were given the most impressive burial rites possible. They were entombed with their limitless fortune. None of their graves in the thousands of years after their passing were ever pillaged, and this is incredibly rare in the world of archaeology. Sadly, we don't know where the Bactrian treasure is today. We know that it was moved sometime in 2021 when the government of Afghanistan began to crumble, and we also know, based on reports coming out of Afghanistan, that the Taliban are currently searching for the treasure. The Taliban has stated that they will protect archaeological and heritage culture sites, but whether that is really the case remains to be seen. The Carolingian treasure hoard. In 2020, a couple of amateur treasure hunters with metal detectors stumbled upon a hoard of coins from the 9th century. It happened in Poland, just outside the small town of Biskupiec. But unlike the Bactrian treasure that was made up almost entirely of gold artifacts, this treasure hoard was made up of mostly silver. A total of 118 silver denarii coins were dug from the dirt, with most of them dating from sometime between 814 and 877. This was the time of the Carolingians, the Frankish dynasty. The Frankish reached their peak in the year 800 when Charlemagne was crowned Emperor of Rome and Emperor of the Carolingian Empire. But when Charlemagne passed away in 814, the empire fractured. Within a century, the larger kingdom had splintered into the Holy Roman Empire and the Kingdom of France. As for the coins, they were minted about 50 years after Charlemagne's death. The ruler of the Carolingians from between 814 and 840 was Louis the Pious, followed by Charles the Bald. The coin hoard had probably been buried by someone who wanted to keep their treasure safe for later, but died and never got around to digging it up. Buried Spanish treasure. A buried Spanish treasure from the 11th century recently ended up for sale on social media. The Amarguilla treasure, which is named for the estate it was found buried on, includes a set of 623 pieces of 11th century jewelry, including 98 pieces of gold, silver, and gilded silver. Included in the gold pieces are 4 wrist and ankle bracelets with joins that are shaped to look like birds' heads, as well as a beautiful and elegant Star of David set within a gold ring. The treasure dates back to 1009, when a civil war broke out in the Caliphate of Cordoba. This was when Muslims ruled the Iberian Peninsula of Spain, along with huge parts of North Africa. The war lasted for 20 years, with the end result being the defeat of Hisham II and the beginning of decline for the Muslim invaders of Spain. At some point during all this upheaval, it's most likely that a Jewish citizen took the treasure and buried it. They likely feared that the fighting would show up at their front door, and their valuables and jewelry would be stolen. Well, these fears had likely been correct because the hoarder never did dig up his gold. Something must have happened to him. Instead, the treasure remained buried for over 1,000 years. It was finally discovered by the police in an industrial warehouse of all places. Photographs appeared on social media depicting treasure that clearly had more value than your average gold jewelry and came from the 11th century. Alberto Canto, an archaeologist from the Autonomous University of Madrid, described the pieces as being part of the best collection of jewelry ever found from that time. National police then had to track down the person who had posted the images and had possession of the items in order to prevent any illegal trading of the treasure. What would you do if you found this kind of treasure? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already because we have lots of videos about amazing discoveries coming up. Monte Alban's Tomb 7. Tomb 7 is one of the richest burial plots ever discovered in ancient Mesoamerica. Tomb 7 was unearthed at Monte Alban, in the Mexican state of Oaxaca. Monte Alban was the ceremonial center for the Zapotec people, as well as one of the earliest cities ever constructed in pre-modern Mexico. The city was built around the year 500 AD and became a sprawling capital within a short period of time. The city finally lost its power in the year 750, when neighboring states started flexing their own influence and breaking apart from the Zapotec people. Monte Alban was then abandoned by the year 900 and then repopulated roughly a century later. The people who showed up to Monte Alban after the Zapotec were the Mixtec. The Mixtec ruled a huge swath of Mexico from Oaxaca to Tlaxcala from between 1000 and 1697. They held their power until around the time that the Spanish came with their boats and their guns and changed Central and South American history forever. It was the Mixtec people who filled the tombs of Monte Alban with unimaginable treasures. When archaeologists broke open the sealed entranceway to Tomb 7, they couldn't believe their eyes. The tomb was nearly overflowing with gold. The archaeologists uncovered exotic gold necklaces, mysterious pendants decorated with even more mysterious zoomorphic creatures, and impressive headdresses that may have been worn by royalty. They also discovered a massive golden mask and many other beautiful and mysterious artifacts that held clues about the lives and deaths of the members of this incredible ancient culture. Most of these treasures can now be seen on display in the city of Oaxaca at the local museums. The Nebra Sky Disc. The Nebra Sky Disc is one of the most amazing artifacts ever discovered. Most experts agree it's at least 3,600 years old, originating from the Bronze Age. But what makes it so incredible? It's the oldest map of the stars in the world. UNESCO even includes the Nebra Sky Disc on its list of important historical documents. This treasure was found back in 1999 in Germany. The Nebra Sky Disc is a small plate emblazoned with gold symbols meant to represent the sun, the moon, and the stars. There are also representations of the solstices and other mysterious cosmic phenomena. But here's what's really interesting. Even though the artifact was found hundreds of miles from Stonehenge, there could be a link between the two. When Stonehenge was built in 2500 BC, its purpose had something to do with the movement of the sun. The Nebra Sky Disc is just about as old as Stonehenge and also depicts the movement of the sun. Experts say the sun was a central theme to European religions throughout the Bronze Age. Maybe whoever made the Nebra Sky Disc practiced the same religion as the people who built Stonehenge. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. St. Augustine Shipwreck. In 2021, a group of volunteers went down to Crescent Beach in St. Augustine, Florida. Their job was to dig up what experts say could be a shipwreck from the 19th century. The volunteer researchers, in participation with the St. Augustine Lighthouse Archaeological Maritime Program, found proof of a smashed vessel hidden beneath the sand. And so far, they have already uncovered a huge portion of the ship's hull. The ship is believed to be the Caroline Eddy, a merchant vessel that sank back in 1880. This is based on a log kept by the keeper of the St. Augustine lighthouse. The keeper detailed how the Caroline eddy was struck by a storm at least 9 miles out at sea. The ship sank before it ever reached the shore. Then, over the next few years, it was pushed all the way onto the beach by the shifting tides. The wreckage was covered over with sand and then lost for 140 years, until a storm in 2020 revealed it yet again. While the volunteer archaeologists haven't found any actual treasure, they do say that based on the size of the timber used to build the vessel, it was definitely a cargo ship. That means that even if there isn't treasure buried with it on the beach, there is likely goods, artifacts, and perhaps even treasure still sitting at the bottom of the sea. It's just waiting to be found. Sunken gold. Amateur freedivers have discovered gold treasure from the fall of the Roman Empire. The divers were swimming along the coast of Spain when they noticed something shiny glinting from the rocks below. Upon closer inspection, the shiny objects turned out to be coins from 1,500 years ago. After more and more digging, they realized they had an actual treasure hoard on their hands. It has since been recorded as one of the largest gold coin hoards found that dates back to the Roman Empire. The freedivers took a small sample of the coins that they found and got a hold of some archaeologists from the University of Alicante. Then, with the help of the archaeologists, they went back and uncovered a total of 53 gold coins. They've been dated from between 364 and 408, the years in which the Western Roman Empire was in major decline. The Roman emperors depicted on the coins include Valentinian I, the second, Theodosius I, Arcadius, and Honorius. But coins weren't all that they found. They also uncovered copper nails and the deteriorated remains of a sea chest. In other words, the coins had been stashed in some sort of treasure box when they got lost at sea. How they wound up underwater is anyone's guess, though it's likely the chest came from an unknown shipwreck. After 1,500 years submerged, the chest disintegrated and the gold coins got swept away in the current.
Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark may have just been discovered in the Turkish mountains. Three-dimensional scans conducted by biblical archaeologists using ground-penetrating radar have revealed the exact shape of a giant boat buried underneath a mountain. Even more amazing is that this location is the same place where the Ark is said to have stopped after the flood in the book of Genesis. The discovery fits perfectly with what's written in the Bible. But of course, nobody has actually started digging to see if there is a boat under the mountain. This could very well just be a geological formation. It could just be the way Mount Tendurek looks. But according to Andrew Jones, longtime Ark hunter who was involved with the study, this is almost definitely Noah's great ship. He says the result of their survey shows a man-made object underneath heaps of debris, likely caused by a mud flow. In other words, the Ark landed here before being buried by a giant landslide. We just won't know the truth until archaeologists get permission to go down there and start digging. Alien abduction in the mountains. In September of 1961, a Canadian couple named Betty and Barney Hill were on their way to Portsmouth from Montreal. They were going on their honeymoon vacation. But as they drove through the mysterious White Mountains in New Hampshire, they experienced what they described as an alien abduction. This is one of the stranger cases of alien abductions that we know about. They were both respected members of society. Betty was a social worker and Barney was a postal worker. In other words, they supposedly weren't crazy, and yet they both had the same story about what happened in the mountains that day. They first saw light in the sky that appeared to be following them. Eventually, the light was following so close that the couple pulled over to see what was going on. They took out a pair of binoculars to try and get a better look, and they were shocked to see that they were being followed by some kind of flying saucer. They quickly got back in the car and tried to drive away, and that was when the object came in closer and hovered right above their car. Betty and Barney described it as being the size of a jet, except flat as a pancake. It was around this point where both of them lost consciousness. They woke up the next morning in their vacation house in Portsmouth, with no recollection of how they got there. This became one of the biggest and most mysterious alien abductions in U.S. history. There is even a plaque detailing their story in the White Mountains. So, if you're driving through here at night, be aware of the danger. Primitive lovers. A pair of cavemen lovers were just discovered by Italian authorities way up in the mountains. It all started when rumors began to circulate in the small town of Moggio Udinese that there was a couple living in seclusion up on the mountain overlooking the town. The local police climbed up the mountain to flush the couple out. After all, you can't just live for free off the land, not in this day and age. What the authorities discovered was a man in his 50s and his girlfriend, half his age, with nothing except a pair of sleeping bags and a circular stone fireplace that they had dug in the dirt. According to the head forest ranger, the couple went wild 6 months before and had literally been living under a rock. At first, the couple did not want to come down from the mountain. They said it was their right to live in the wilderness if they wanted to, but they eventually conceded and allowed the rescue team to bring them down to rejoin civilization. And believe it or not, the woman had actually given birth to a baby girl inside an alpine hut just before they went wild. She handed the baby over to a family member and then ran off into the woods with her boyfriend. He told her that he would build a forest cabin for them to live in, but they ended up just hiding under a rock instead. The couple has since been released to do whatever they please by the authorities. As of now, I have no idea if they went back up into the mountains or called it quits and went home. Skeleton Lake. There is a secret lake high up in the Himalayan mountains with a dark and sordid history. It's called Rupkund Lake, located 16,500 feet above sea level. It's at the bottom of the Trisul Mountain, one of the highest in all of India. Back in 1942, a patrolling group of British forest rangers uncovered the lake, along with hundreds of skeletons scattered around its shores. It's hard to say exactly how many skeletons have been left here. The lake expands and shrinks each year because of the frigid temperatures. The skeletons are only visible in the summer when the snow melts. Years ago, the rangers found skeletons with flesh still attached to their bones, looking like they hadn't been dead for very long. Since then, somewhere around 800 dead bodies have been found scattered around the lake. But ever since the initial discovery, scientists have been struggling to figure out how they got there. To this day, scientists still don't have all the answers, but they do have a lot of theories. One theory says that about 870 years ago, a large group of people were moving through the area when they got trapped in a blizzard. All of them starved and died, slowly decaying along the edges of the lake. Another theory says that the remains are from Indian soldiers who tried to invade Tibet back in 1841, but failed, and then died trying to find their way back home over the Himalayas. Since many of the skeletons have holes in their head, some researchers argue that people were caught in a hailstorm that was so bad it literally pummeled them to death. Another theory based on carbon dating of the remains, which found that the bodies were left at the lake over a period of 1,000 years, means there was no single event at all, but something that happened over the course of many years. Perhaps the lake was actually used as some kind of ritual area where people were taken and sacrificed for unknown reasons. What theory do you believe? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe for more videos like these. Ancient Mountain Castle. High up in the mountains of Turkey, archaeologists have found the ruins of a kingdom that's been lost to history for almost 3,000 years. They unearthed a castle that has been directly linked to the Urartu civilization. The Urartu once dominated much of modern Armenia, parts of Turkey, and parts of Iran, and they actually warred with the kingdom of Assyria back in the 1st millennium BC. The castle itself had gone undetected throughout all of modern history. It was only just now that it was uncovered 8,200 feet above sea level, hidden by Turkey's remote mountain peaks. It was students from the Van Uzuncu Yale University who excavated its foundations, confirming it to be 2,800 years old. But researchers say it was mostly used during the Middle Ages, 2,000 years after it was built, and here is why. The Urartu emerged as a civilization in the 13th century BC. They were a big political force in the Middle East, but lost control because of the neighboring Assyrians. Too much war saw them crumble, and by the 7th century BC, they had all but been eradicated. They vanished into thin air, leaving very little behind. This castle is one of the only buildings ever discovered that belonged to the Urartu, and because the castle had gone unused for so long, people simply moved in during the Middle Ages and used it as their own. Recent bones. Near a hiking trail in the Pyrenees Mountains, very close to the border between France and Spain, a couple of hikers discovered a skeleton. These hikers were simply exploring the mountain when they came across a skeleton so fresh that it still had hair on its scalp. The hikers immediately alerted the Spanish police, who launched an investigation. Along with the human skeleton, authorities discovered a small collection of animal remains. This brought them to the realization that the person had probably been dragged to this remote part of the mountain by a wild animal. They now believe the skeleton could belong to a woman named Esther Dingley, who went missing while hiking back in November. It was November 22nd when she sent her very last text message to friends, saying that she had driven to the Spanish side of the mountains and that she was going to go hiking. But this was at the beginning of France going into lockdown over the coronavirus, preventing a thorough search of the area. Authorities with both France and Spain did basic search and rescue attempts, but presumed Dingley was already dead. Since she has never been found, the experts are pretty certain that the human skeleton belongs to her. But as for how she died, that's still something of a mystery. She may have perished, lost and hungry and confused, then had her corpse ravaged by wild animals. The Tula statuette. It was 1902 when an indigenous man was plowing his field in the Tula Mountains of Mexico in the state of Veracruz. While doing this, he came across a mysterious green stone about the size of a mango. It turned out to be a piece of jadeite, an artifact over 1,800 years old. A picture of a human figure with bird wings and a beak for a mouth was carved into it. It was also inscribed with a bizarre set of hieroglyphics. By 1903, the Tula statuette had made it to the Smithsonian Institute in the United States. At first, researchers thought they were dealing with a relic from the Mayan civilization, but when the hieroglyphics were compared to the Mayan characters available at the time, there was no likeness between them. By 1907, it was clear that nobody had any idea who crafted this mysterious statue. It wasn't until 1960 that scholars put forth the idea that it was made by the Olmec civilization, a group of people who came 1,000 years before the Maya. Finally, in 1993, a pair of linguistics experts named John Justison and Terence Kaufman deciphered the hieroglyphics written on the stone. The translation revealed that the statue came from the year 162, at the height of the Olmec society. But to this very day, other scientists dispute the claim, saying that because almost no other examples of the Olmec script exist, these people wouldn't have had any real way to decipher the hieroglyphics. It's still up in the air whether this mysterious mountain artifact was made by the Olmec, and what its exact purpose was almost 2,000 years ago. Ancient human dwellings. In Ethiopia's Bale Mountains, over 11,000 feet above sea level, archaeologists have uncovered ancient human dwellings. The team of experts found artifacts like stone tools and burned animal bones, as well as other evidence indicating that human beings were living way up in these remote mountains 47,000 years ago. According to the Smithsonian, this represents the earliest evidence of prehistoric human beings living at this high of an altitude. One of the reasons this is so amazing is that ever since archaeology has been around, people have mostly concentrated on areas nearer to sea level. Archaeologists never really considered that ancient people were building their houses way up in the mountains. Now we know better. In the Bale Mountains, researchers found at least 300 rock shelters once occupied by primitive humans. Even more shocking is the fact that these rock shelters were inhabited from between 47,000 and 31,000 years ago. It's honestly hard to comprehend that amount of time. Humans were sheltering in crude rock houses for a full 16,000 years. To put that into perspective, smartphones have only been popular for about 15 years. Microscopic fossils. A new study led by geologist Reed Shearer from Northern Illinois University has found that the East Antarctic ice sheet could collapse in the near future because of climate change, causing massive flooding across the globe. He made this discovery thanks to microscopic ocean fossils. But these fossils weren't found in the ocean. They were actually found high up in the mountains. A colossal deposit of microscopic fossils in the Trans-Antarctic Mountains has shown that when the ice sheet retreated 300 miles, about 4.5 million years ago, during the Pliocene era, marine fossils were pushed way up the mountains, where archaeologists started finding them in the 1980s. Think of it like this. Marine creatures died and were fossilized at the bottom of what was once an ocean. But when the Antarctic ice retreated, the sea level rose at least 75 feet. Some of these fossils were then spat onto the bases of the mountains. When the world got cold again, the fossils solidified in the ice. And as the ice grew and grew, the fossils were pushed even higher up the mountain to where they were found recently. For the first time in 4.5 million years, the temperature of the Earth is warming up to Pliocene levels. And Reed Shearer says that we could see flooding on the same scale as back then. In just a century or two, the sea could once again rise 75 feet, similar to the event that pushed these marine fossils way up in the mountains in the first place. This means that millions of years from today, Future archaeologists could find fossils of current marine creatures like whales and sharks high up in the mountains. Hidden Temple. At the top of Mount Padang in West Java, there is a mysterious pyramid-like structure that could actually be an ancient temple, previously hidden underneath the ground for thousands of years. The structure itself was discovered in the early 19th century, but scientists didn't realize that there was more to it than what they saw on the surface. At the top of the mountain, there are a few broken foundations and pieces of crumbling stone, what archaeologists originally thought was just a ruined building. But recently, archaeologists took a closer look, realizing that the real structure is actually buried underneath the ground. Archaeologists noticed that the hill wasn't shaped right, and that was when they realized they were probably standing on a buried pyramid. After doing tomographic x-rays of the area, they found several layers of something man-made beneath the mountain, spanning an area of at least 15 hectares. The top layer was likely a temple built around 3,500 years ago, but beneath, it's believed that whatever was built dates back at least 8,000 years ago, and it's shaped just like a pyramid. Unfortunately, scans show that the potential pyramid is about 49 feet beneath the surface. It would take a significant amount of money and resources to dig down and find the bones of the lost structure, something not currently possible. So for the next while, we can't do anything except guess as to who built the pyramid that long ago and how it got buried under 50 feet of earth.
A hole in Antarctica. A team of researchers from the University of Toronto have discovered a massive hole the size of Panama on the surface of Antarctica. The discovery is quite baffling to specialists, who can't seem to agree on whether the hole can be blamed on climate change or not. When looking at the satellite images of Antarctica, it seems as though somebody or something blasted a giant pit into the middle of the ice. But what actually happened is called a polynya, a phenomenon in which a giant pit of open water is surrounded by sea ice. It usually happens along the coastal regions of Antarctica, but this one is special because it happened hundreds of miles from the shore. It's deep in the Antarctic interior, and scientists wouldn't even know about it if it weren't for satellites. The polynya is about 30,000 square miles, and scientists can't really say how it formed. Their best guess is that the temperature of the water in the Southern Ocean is abnormally high, causing sea ice to melt and forming a massive hole of nothing in an otherwise relatively solid ice sheet. What this means for the future and how it will impact us? No one has any idea yet. A mysterious monument. Archaeologists have discovered a mysterious monument hidden in plain sight in northern Guatemala. To the naked eye, the monument just looks like a normal hill near the ancient Maya city-state of Tikal. But when researchers really zoomed in on aerial images that they took of the area, they realized that the hill is actually an artificial structure, hidden beneath hundreds of years of soil and vegetation that have piled up. The building turned out to be a pyramid hiding in plain sight, part of an ancient neighborhood that archaeologists have never explored before. On the ground, they would have never known about this mysterious monument because they would have just walked over it, thinking it was nothing but a boring hill covered in grass. What's truly interesting about the ancient neighborhood is that it appears to be distinctly different from all other neighborhoods at Tikal. The buildings are shaped differently with different architectural features, more closely resembling the Aztec capital of Teotihuacan, 800 miles away. After completing laser scanning using light detection and ranging technology, the researchers identified the ancient neighborhood as a tiny replica of one of the squares at Teotihuacan called the Citadel, which happens to include the very famous pyramid of the Feathered Serpent. But what is an Aztec neighborhood doing in a Maya city? It seems that the people of Teotihuacan had built a little slice of home in the Maya capital. The two civilizations must have had some kind of relationship prior to 378 AD. That was when the king of Teotihuacan sent his generals to take over Tikal, which they did successfully. It looks like they installed their own little piece of home about a century before the invasion, but scientists and historians are clueless as to why. A scream of bees. Scientists were researching honeybees and giant hornets in Vietnam when they discovered something terrifying. It turns out that bees actually scream in terror. The researchers recorded sounds made by honeybees when they're attacked by hornets, and now we can listen to the terrible scream of bees when they feel their lives are in danger. I don't think I needed to know this. Bees respond to the threat of hornets by screeching in utter terror. The sounds are called anti-predator pipes. That's actually quite similar to how other animals cry out or shriek when in distress. For example, animals that live in groups or flocks often scream when a predator comes too close, and bees do the same thing. Of course, you can't actually hear the screams with your human ears, which is probably for the best. Scientists only figured out what was happening because they recorded 30,000 communication signals from bees. They found that when the hornets showed up, the communication between the bees became 8 times more intense. The bees created a buzzing noise by vibrating the muscles in their thorax and by shaking their wings. The vibrations pass through their legs, go through the hive, and can be sensed by other bees. To humans, it may sound like a gentle buzzing, but to the bees, they might as well all be screaming bloody murder at the same time. Universe in a lab. A shocking new theory could prove that our universe was created in a laboratory. Wait, what? We might be in the Matrix after all, or we're somebody's crazy experiment. It has to do with quantum gravity technology, something that scientists say could one day elevate us to a Class A civilization. A civilization of this caliber has the technological capabilities to create their own universe. As you may already know, there are a lot of theories floating around about how our universe was created, meaning what happened before the Big Bang. One of these possibilities is that our universe was created by a very advanced civilization in a lab, and scientists are now saying that this could be possible using quantum tunneling. This is a science we don't currently understand, but it has the potential to create a baby universe out of literally nothing. As of right now, we don't actually understand how quite a few very important pillars of physics function. The 2 main pillars that we don't understand are quantum mechanics and quantum gravity. It's not out of the question for us to master these features of physics in the future. As it stands, we are actually a Class D civilization because we can't even function as a species to prevent our own people from dying of hunger, and because we're destroying our own world. We need to upgrade quite a bit just to be a Class C civilization. But sometime very long ago, billions of years in the past, a civilization very similar to us may have mastered all the quantum sciences needed to create a baby universe. That baby universe may have been ours, which expanded at the Big Bang to ultimately create us. What do you think about this? How do you think our universe was created? Let me know in the comments below. Planet 9. Some new information has brought a secret planet back into the spotlight. Technically, Planet 9 is hypothetical. It's a potential planet hiding at the farthest reaches of our solar system, with its gravitational pull being responsible for the peculiar organization of space debris beyond Neptune. For quite some time, researchers have speculated that there is a huge planet hiding from view, influencing the orbit around the sun of all the most distant objects in the solar system. The hypothetical planet is estimated to be about 5 or 10 times larger than Earth, and about 800 times as far from the sun as Earth. In 2021, scientist Michael E. Brown suggested that Planet 9 may have once been closer to the sun, but was pushed out of its orbit by Jupiter billions of years ago, during the formation of the solar system as we know it today. The issue with the planet is that it's never actually been seen by any telescope. There are too many things in the way to either confirm or deny its existence. As far as we know, Planet 9 is the center of its own little cosmic party, so far away from the sun that it takes 20,000 years to complete a single orbit. The glow-in-the-dark spring hare. Researchers have accidentally discovered the first African mammal that literally glows in the dark. It's called a spring hare, and it has fantastic fluorescent abilities that allow it to glow when the lights go out. Fluorescence in nature typically occurs when an animal absorbs light and then bounces it back out of them again. It occurs very rarely in only a handful of mammals across 3 different continents. One of these is the platypus, which was only discovered to glow in the dark in 2020. Cool, right? The newest discovery of the glowing spring hare was made by researchers at Northland College. They had actually been visiting the Field Museum of Natural History in Chicago to check out the fluorescent abilities of flying squirrels when they accidentally pointed their flashlight at a spring hare. Surprise, surprise, they were amazed to see that the spring hare glowed as well. The specimen at the museum was collected back in 1905 and has been glowing for over 100 years. The fluorescence that we're talking about is extremely subtle, meaning you wouldn't actually see it if you crept up on the animal at night. But scientists, seeing as they just made this discovery a few weeks ago, are still trying to figure out what a spring hare being fluorescent means And just what other animals might glow in the dark? Any ideas? Let me know in the comments below. The mysterious Arthur's Stone. There is a mysterious stone tomb in Western England called Arthur's Stone. It supposedly has links to the legendary King Arthur, despite the fact that the stone originated 6,000 years before he may or may not have existed. Recent excavations have shown that this site was first occupied by a mound of earth, meaning even before it was constructed, a different monument was in the same place. It's also not the only mysterious structure from thousands of years ago. There are other old monuments dotting the landscape here, which Julian Thomas from the University of Manchester says is a ceremonial landscape similar to Stonehenge. The only difference is that Arthur's Stone and the other monuments in the region are significantly older, by thousands of years. But what it implies is that in this part of the UK, the Neolithic people were very serious about their spirituality. Arthur's Stone itself is pretty small, consisting only of 9 standing stones and 1 large capstone. It leads to an underground passage that was once a burial chamber, although whatever human remains were there have been gone for centuries. The person buried beneath the stone tomb could have been a great Neolithic warrior, a local king, or even a high priest. But because this is thousands of years ago we're talking about, historians just don't know the truth about the mysterious stone tomb. An interstellar object. An interstellar object named Oumuamua could be the closest thing to a real UFO that anyone has ever seen. The object itself was discovered floating through our solar system, a massive chunk of something 3,000 feet long and possibly about 548 feet thick. Scientists couldn't immediately identify it, and so they resorted to educated guessing. One of those guesses was that the interstellar object was an iceberg of pure nitrogen floating by our planet, about 85 times the distance of the moon. This would mean it was a chunk that broke off of a frozen planet similar to Pluto and has just been floating through space for millions of years. Other researchers, including a Harvard astrophysicist, claim that the object was a type of intergalactic vessel called a light sail sent from a different civilization. They back up their reasoning by saying there isn't enough nitrogen in all of the universe to create a frozen iceberg 3,000 feet long and over 500 feet thick. It's just not scientifically possible. After debunking this first theory, we can open up the possibility of an actual alien ship. The mysterious object was moving at speeds of 57,000 miles per hour. It definitely did not originate in our solar system. And what makes it so strange is that it did not display the ordinary behavior of a rock moving through space. It seemed to move on its own trajectory, unaffected by the pull of the sun or any other large celestial object. It could be that it was a long-distance vessel powered by light from stars, cruising to, well, nobody knows exactly where it could be going. Once it left our solar system, we lost track of it and have no idea where it is now. Brain tapeworm. A man was recently hospitalized with a mysterious illness. He was experiencing seizures, he was disoriented, and he was exhibiting very strange behavior. After undergoing multiple tests, doctors still had no idea what was wrong with him. He was a medical anomaly. At least he was, until doctors finally made the terrifying discovery that he had tapeworms living in his brain. They had been there for a very long time. Decades! This bizarre case was documented in the New England Journal of Medicine. The man was 38 years old and otherwise in perfect health. But one night, his wife found him on the floor shaking and yammering gibberish. He was hospitalized, poked and prodded, and then the doctors found the tapeworms. 20 years earlier, the man had been living in a rural part of Guatemala. There, it's actually not that rare to accidentally eat parasites from pork that wasn't cooked properly, or by eating in an unsanitary restaurant. And doctors believe that is probably what happened. The tiny parasitic eggs spread throughout his body until they wound up in his brain. They had traveled through his muscles, into his bloodstream, and up into his noggin. He was totally fine for 20 years, until the giant tapeworms got too big and started pressing on parts of his brain that began to change everything. Thankfully, this was a pretty easy fix. Doctors just treated him with anti-parasitic and anti-inflammatory drugs, and he was released from the hospital within 5 days. Fossils in the sky. A man discovered fossils at the top of a mountain, 8,300 feet above sea level. The fossils that he found were embedded inside a giant rock, and they looked like some kind of prehistoric tentacle monsters. He wasn't an archaeologist or even a paleontologist. He was just an ordinary guy who uploaded his discovery to TikTok. The video quickly amassed over 3 million views, and people began to speculate over just how exactly fossils ended up so high at the top of a mountain. Paleontologists were quick to come forward and label the fossils as crinoids, a group of sea creatures from millions of years ago related to starfish and sand dollars. They thrived during the Paleozoic era between 250 and 500 million years before today. Tim Ewan, the curator for the Natural History Museum, calls them sea lilies. He describes these creatures as having a stem anchored to the sea floor, kind of like a living flower. The rest of their body floats slightly above the anchor, allowing them to feed on tiny food particles by catching them with their long tentacles. They are fascinating creatures, with some even still alive today. But again, what are they doing at the top of a mountain? The reason is actually quite simple. It has nothing to do with a biblical flood like some people suggest, but rather tectonic plates. These fossils were initially under the sea, but because of plate tectonics, they are now at the top of the mountain. It was a process that took millions of years, with continents literally colliding against each other due to the intense tectonic forces going on underground, which slowly lifted up the land to create mountains. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite recent discovery? Let me know in the comments below, and remember to subscribe if you haven't already. We've got lots of videos coming up. See you next time. Bye!